Guys, I am so excited for today's video because I am going to introduce you to a model of grief that when I heard about it, it was such a light bulb moment. I was like, yes, that is exactly what I'm doing. And I got so excited that finally I had read something that sort of summed up the way that I was doing things. Can I get a hell yes? So I'm going to share that with you today. Stay tuned. So, what is this amazing model of grief that I am talking about? It is called the dual process grief model. So, let me explain what that is. The dual process grief model is the idea that people don't go necessarily in linear stages of grief like the typical 5 stages, but instead they kind of bounce back and forth. Think of it like a tennis ball going back and forth, okay? Like bouncing back and forth in between the tasks of grief and the tasks of moving forward with your life. Have you heard of the dual process model before? I'm curious if people have heard of it. So let me know down in the comments below if this is something you're familiar with or if you've never heard of the dual process model before. So, the technical terms for these two sides that we bounce between are loss oriented stressors and restoration oriented stressors. So, the difference between the two loss oriented stressors are the things that you focus on that have to do with your loss, hence the name. So, these would be things like crying and looking at old photos and going to visit the grave site or accident site and the emotions that go along with that, like I said, with the tears and the devastation and the missing what is lost and that feeling that your life is never going to be the same. And also dwelling on the past, dwelling on the memories of your person, dwelling on the way that your life used to be and wishing that it were different. Those are all loss oriented stressors. On the other side are the restoration oriented stressors. So that is when you are focusing yourself on the business of continuing on with your life, even though it's different. So these would be things like going to work every day, paying your bills on time because the bills don't stop, adapting to new routines, figuring out new schedules. I love it because this model of grief accepts the idea that we don't just go in a straight line, but we're kind of always swinging back and forth between dealing with our loss and dealing with the loss of our lives as we knew it, and the realization that we have to come up with a new way of doing things that doesn't include, unfortunately, the person that we love that we lost. It's kind of like confronting your grief on one hand, and then on the other hand, confronting the fact that your life is going to be different without that person. And what I especially love is that it makes it less overwhelming, kind of the going back and forth. So we grieve as much as we can those losses. And then we kind of switch over just as a matter of self preservation to the more practical tasks of the other side. So, to kind of give you examples of this process, I am going to use two fictional grievers that we will call Emma and John. So, let's say that Emma has lost her husband. Okay, her husband passed away. Emma, if she is using the dual process model of grief, she might be spending some of her time, a lot of her time, probably mourning the loss of her husband. So, crying, looking at old photographs, feeling sorry for herself, rightfully so, that this person that she loved is no longer with her. So at times she is just mired in those tears, in that sadness. But then on the other side, she is also learning how to deal with her new life. So she is paying her bills and she is figuring out how to get her kids to places that maybe her husband drove. She is perhaps learning how to meal plan or cook if her husband was the one who cooked dinners. So it's the more practical side of life. Going back and forth in this way helps her so that she is not completely overwhelmed by one side or the other. And then our next fake person we will say is John. So let's say John lost his mom. The loss-oriented triggers would be things like cleaning out his mom's stuff and sitting and going through her things and having those memories of his mom, or being with family and maybe siblings and talking about the memories of his mother. Whereas on the other side, it would be things like, finding his mom's will, maybe becoming the executor of the will and going through and canceling all of the different subscriptions his mom had, and very practical things like that. And again, the same as with Emma, it's going to help John so that he still holds on to those memories and he's still processing the loss, but is not overwhelmed by it because he's also shifting his focus to the practical tasks at hand. I absolutely freaking love this model of grief. And I would say it by far most accurately reflects what I myself went through and am going through in my own personal grief journey. And the reason that I love it so much is because it acknowledges that you can do both of these things at once. You don't have to be completely drowning in your sorrow and unable to function. You can do both. And it actually suggests that it is healthier to do both. In my opinion, it is a very flexible and especially realistic approach to grief. It acknowledges the fact that people are obviously sad and upset and devastated and having those feelings, but also that people need to continue with their lives, which a lot of times is difficult to face, but can also be healing at the same time. And for you as a griever, knowing about this process and knowing that it is a normal and beneficial process can perhaps relieve some of that guilt that you might have for doing the things that help you continue on your life's journey. This model allows grieving people like us to acknowledge and give ourselves permission to both feel our feelings, but then also to not feel guilty or like we are betraying our lost loved one, doing the things that we need to do in life in order to continue into the future. So, what are your thoughts about this model? Do you think that it describes how you are dealing with your grief, or do you think it would be a healthy way to try grieving? Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. The dual model process of grief provides a compassionate framework for understanding bereavement and loss. It acknowledges the complexity of human emotions and behaviors in the face of loss, and I think offers a much more adaptable way of coping. I hope you found this helpful. If you would like the video, subscribe, share it, leave a comment, any of those things definitely help the algorithm so that I can reach more people. So I would really appreciate it. As always, if there are any topics that you would like me to cover, I would love for you to leave them in a comment below. And I will see you guys next week. As always, sending love and hugs. We all know that grief can leave us feeling alone, unmotivated, and even hopeless. That's why I'm so proud to have partnered with HelpText to provide a full year of ongoing expert support to my subscribers. HelpText has individualized support for caregivers, people dealing with a difficult diagnosis, or grieving the loss of a loved one, pregnancy, or even a pet. You answer questions at sign up to get specific support just for you, including 2 texts per week and even extra texts on special or difficult days like birthdays or anniversaries. And the best part is, if you sign up using the site linked in my description, you'll get a 10% discount off of your subscription. Thank you so much to HelpText for offering this deal to my subscribers. When life gets hard, getting support from HelpText is easy.